You died, and your soul split in two, not symbolically. Literally, one part of you tried to rise, the other sank. And before either could escape, something else woke up. It wasn't a god. It wasn't a demon. It was you, or at least the part of you that couldn't accept the end. In Chinese cosmology, every human has two souls. Hun, the spiritual soul, and Po, the corporeal soul. Hun is light. Po is heavy. Hun wants to return to the heavens. Po wants to stay with the body. But if your death was violent, sudden, or soaked in unresolved emotion, the separation doesn't go clean. Something is left behind, not a ghost in the traditional sense, a residue, a shadow, a self-made hunter. It forms in the rift between Hun and Po, and it takes shape fast. The moment you die, it starts to follow. Not to hurt you, not at first, but to rejoin with what it lost. This thing has 49 days to catch the rest of you before the spiritual window closes. During that time, the Hun must descend, the Po must dissolve, and this ghost, this fractured echo, must find what it is missing or become something worse. You think death ends everything. It doesn't. It divides you and then watches what each half does next. The first few days after death are quiet, but not peaceful. The Hun floats upward, pulled by unseen forces, confused but steady. The Po sinks slowly, heavy with memory and matter, still clinging to what the body once felt. And between them, something else lingers. The ghost formed in their separation has no fixed shape. It isn't whole, but it isn't empty either. It watches the Hun from below, not with jealousy, but with hunger. Not a hunger for flesh or fear, something worse, a hunger to be real, to take the place it lost. At first it drifts, weak and shapeless. But the more the world forgets your name, the stronger it becomes. In Chinese tradition, the 49 days after death are sacred. Each week, rituals are performed to help the Hun ascend and the Po dissolve. Food is offered, incense burned, paper money sent through fire, but not for the ghost. No one prays for it. No one speaks to it. That silence feeds it. It becomes a shadow with weight, a presence that trails behind you wherever your soul drifts. Sometimes it looks like a blurry version of yourself. Sometimes it looks like nothing at all, but you can feel it. Like breath on the back of your neck. Like a second heartbeat out of rhythm. The dead don't fear it. They feel responsible for it, because it's not an invader. It's what happens when something inside you refuses to let go. And it will follow for as long as it can, 49 days. That's how long it takes for the balance to tip toward freedom or corruption. Some ghosts linger. This one clings. It doesn't drift through walls or rattle doors. It stays behind your soul, as if tethered, as if waiting for something to fall. During the 49 days, the rituals performed by the living act as a kind of map, trying to guide the Hun upward through celestial checkpoints. Each ritual is like a signpost. Offerings on the 7th day, prayers on the 14th, lanterns on the 21st. These are more than tradition. They are necessary. Without them, the Hun drifts aimlessly, and the Po resists dissolution. And in that space between, unmarked by ceremony, untouched by prayer, the ghost gains shape. It starts to understand its own presence, not as a soul. As a replacement, it listens when someone mourns. It waits when someone forgets. It watches from the corners of rooms where no breath moves the dust. The Chinese speak of dreams during this period, strange, repetitive dreams, the dead calling from dark places, faces that should be gone, watching from mirrors. These aren't messages, they're symptoms, evidence that the ghost has started to move outward, trying to be seen, trying to return. It doesn't speak with a voice. It speaks through disturbance, time slipping, rooms cold, voices almost remembered. You might wake feeling like someone was standing at your bed. You might dream of walking, only to realize your footsteps are not your own. That's when it's closest. That's when it's almost touching. For the ghost, memory is a doorway. If someone speaks your name with pain or longing, it hears that call as an invitation. It doesn't need a body. It only needs a space, a thought, a shadow. The 49 days are not just a limit. They're a barrier, a countdown. If the Hun hasn't ascended by the final day, the ghost can begin to replace it, not by erasing what you were, but by wearing it. And once it believes it's real, it will never let go. That's how spirits are born that no one recognizes, yet everyone fears, not from hell, not from gods, but from people who died incomplete and stayed that way. The rituals were never meant to honor the dead. They were meant to keep the ghost from becoming something else. Each fire lit, each bowl of food offered, each chant spoken aloud was a thread holding the spiritual world in place, reminding it who you were and where you belonged. Without them, the boundary between the Hun, the Po, and the ghost dissolves. This is when the haunting begins, not the dramatic kind with screams or broken glass, but the slow corrosion of memory. A widow hears your voice behind her shoulder. A child sees your face in strangers. Your favorite song plays when no one is near. These are not signs of grief. They are signs of overlap. The ghost is finding places where your identity still echoes and pushing through. In rare cases, when the rituals are ignored and the separation is fully broken, the ghost may try to return not into the body, but into the world. It may follow the Hun upward and get caught, or follow the Po downward and get stuck, or find a way into someone else. The Chinese believe that's how certain wandering spirits are born. Not born from evil, but from failure. Failure to separate. Failure to let go. The ghost carries your voice, your face, your memories, but none of them are whole. Like a painting left out in the rain, it remembers your shape, but not your meaning. And if someone calls to it, thinking it is you, it might respond. But what answers won't be what they hoped for. It will be quieter, slower, empty in the eyes. It doesn't lie. It simply doesn't know the difference anymore. Between you and it, between memory and form. That's why the 49 days matter. They are not a farewell. They are a safeguard. A way to protect the living from what they might bring back by loving you too hard, too long, too blindly. Because love, too, can summon, and the ghost never stops listening. There are stories of people who died and returned, not through resurrection, but through misrecognition. A man who hears his mother whisper his name each night, years after her passing, until he stops remembering what her voice truly sounded like. A woman who dreams of her husband daily, until one morning she sees him standing by the door and invites him inside. These moments are not hallucinations. They are intersections. The ghost doesn't force its way in. It waits for the door to open, and memory is that door. The most dangerous ghosts are not the ones that terrorize. They're the ones that comfort. The ones that slip into routines, fill in silences, answer to names they no longer have the right to claim. The old tailies say some ghosts survive past the 49 days by nesting in grief. If enough emotion surrounds them, they can linger for generations. Not as spirits floating through temples or shrines, but as habits. Shadows in a certain hallway. A voice that always speaks when the rain begins. A presence so familiar no one questions it. This is why forgetting is not always a cruelty. It is sometimes the only mercy left. To remember someone properly, you must also let them leave. You must let the Hun rise, let the Po fade, and let the ghost collapse under the weight of being uninvited. But if you feed the ghost with longing, with regret, with desperate prayer done without understanding, then you give it permission. You blur the edge, and eventually you might call something back that looks like your loved one, feels like them, sounds like them, but inside it is empty. The shape is right, The timing is right. But what returned is not the person you lost. It is what failed to leave. And once it is here, it does not go back. By the final week, the split is no longer fresh. The Hun has either found its way to ascension or floats in confusion, still waiting for the rituals to lift it. The Po has either rotted fully into the earth or remains clinging to decayed bones. But the ghost, the echo formed in the space between, is now something else entirely. It has watched for 6 weeks. It has followed, waited, learned. It remembers how you walked, how you stood, how you hesitated before speaking. And now it tries to complete itself. It visits places you once loved. It circles people who once knew you. It listens for prayers that were never meant for it. Some monks say this is the most dangerous moment, not when the ghost is weak and formless, but when it begins to believe it is whole. It no longer wanders in silence. It begins to respond. A dream, once vague, becomes specific. A flicker of movement turns into a shadow with shape. You hear your name spoken not in comfort, but in warning. In the old temples, there are chants reserved for the 7th week, meant not to honor the soul, but to close the doors. These rites do not call, they seal. Because if the ghost is still present on the 49th day, it may try to stay. And what it becomes next is not a person. It is not a spirit. It is something without a name, a thing that remembers how to smile, but not why. A thing that stands beside the living, waiting to be mistaken for something it never truly was. It does not ask. It does not beg. It only remains. The window has closed. The body is gone. The Hun did not rise. The Po did not fade. And now, in that silence, the ghost survives, not because it should, but because no one stopped it. What survives past the 49th day is not bound by ritual anymore. It no longer answers to incense or prayer. The ghost, now fully untethered, has crossed a threshold that few recognize until it's too late. It no longer waits for remembrance. It no longer needs your name. It becomes a creature of pattern, of proximity, of emotional residue. It attaches itself to places where pain still breathes, where grief sits unspoken, where the silence between people stretches too long. It doesn't haunt in the way Western stories imagine. It doesn't scream, doesn't move objects, doesn't scratch at doors. Instead, it lives quietly inside repetitions. A word you keep hearing. A face you nearly remember, but can't quite name. A pause in conversation that feels too familiar. It hides in moments of unfinished thought, feeding on the tension of things left unsaid. If two people remember the same dead face differently, it slips between their versions. If a shrine is built with love but no understanding, it waits there. It waits because it doesn't know what else to do. It was never meant to last this long. The rituals were supposed to stop it. The forgetting was supposed to dissolve it. But now it persists, not because of power, but because of permission. Somewhere, someone still calls to it, still welcomes it, still looks at the shadow and says, without question, that it belongs. And when that happens, the ghost becomes real enough to stay. Not visible, not physical, but woven into the fabric of a home, a lineage, a habit that repeats itself with no clear origin. And the longer it stays, the more it believes it was never dead at all. In some villages, mirrors are covered for months after death, not to block the soul, but to prevent the ghost from finding a face to wear. In others, doorways are sealed with red thread, symbols etched into thresholds not to invite luck, but to confuse whatever now waits outside. Because once the ghost believes it belongs, it becomes harder to remove than the person ever was. It blends with silence. It inhabits memories half forgotten. And when it answers, it does so in ways so familiar no one questions it. But there is a difference. The real soul fades with time. The ghost does not. The real voice grows softer with distance. The ghost repeats itself endlessly. And in that repetition, it grows sharper, emptier, more present. What remains in the end is not the person, not the soul, not even the grief. What remains is the echo, the failed separation, the fragment that followed too far for too long. It cannot go back. It cannot move forward. It can only become part of the living world in ways they do not see until something feels off, something feels wrong, and someone finally realizes they've been living beside a name that should no longer answer. This is the cost of a broken death, of a soul divided but never healed. Hun and Po were never meant to be reunited, and when they try, the world remembers why.